All right, I'm going to resist the temptation to make everyone stand up and stretch because I know these chairs are really comfy right after lunch. But we are going to go on a journey today. So thank you, everyone, for taking the time, and thank you to the entire team at Spreedly. You've put on an amazing conference. So as you heard, I am Katherine McClure. I am with PPRO. And what PPRO does is that we are a provider of alternate or local payment methods for acquirers and PSPs. What that means is we don't do Visa, we don't do MasterCard, any of what we think of in the States as traditional card methods, but we do over 140 different payment methods from around the globe. So we're going to talk about a few of those today, and we are going to take a whirlwind trip around the world to kind of show you how people shop and how people pay. But first, before you take any journey, you have to pack your bags, and we're going to do that with a few facts about e-commerce. First of all, it is growing. That's probably a surprise to nobody in the room. The world is becoming more and more digital. 248 million people get online for the first time every single year right now. And certainly, globally, being humans, there are a number of things that we like to do when we go online, and certainly one of them is to shop. That is also being dovetailed with the rise of the middle class globally, so that definitely adds to the desire for people to shop online. Something you may not know is in that rise of the middle class, it's happening in a number of places that you may not think about. So PwC, I read recently, 6 of the 7 biggest economies that are going to exist in 2050 are considered to be emerging economies today. So the demographics of the world, the economics of the world are set for a lot of big shifts. Now, something else to consider is that global e-commerce, just 4 years from now, in 2023, is expected to be $6.3 trillion. That's up 82% from just last year. So really what that means for you is that there's a massive opportunity in e-commerce and definitely in cross-border e-commerce. Now, you take a look at this and see, well, gosh, the US is kind of behind other regions of the world when it comes to a percentage of e-commerce sales being cross-border. The EU and China are certainly ahead of us in that regard, even though 85% of the world's purchasing power is outside the United States borders. Now, for those of you that are merchants in the room, who sells cross-border? I know a few of you do. All right. About half, I think, of the hands went up for that. Well, you're better than average because only 36% of merchants in the United States sell cross-border. And this kind of came home to me very recently. My office is in Midtown Atlanta, and a box showed up, and it had the name of a colleague of mine that is based in Germany. We thought, well, that's strange. Why would we be getting something for this guy? So I open it up, not thinking, well, maybe it's something that his name accidentally got on, it's something for the office. Turns out it was stuff that he ordered online that he wanted personally. So we rang him up and said, hey, we got your box, don't know why it came here. And he said, well, I really wanted these items, but they don't ship overseas. I couldn't do anything to get it sent to me at home in Germany, so I had it sent to your office. I have a meeting in Miami in a few weeks. If you guys could ship it down to Miami, that would be great. He obviously really wanted that stuff. If you're having your customers go that far to get merchandise, think how much more you would sell if you actually shipped and worked with people in all the countries that want to have your things. And I'm going to protect their identity and not what they bought. So something else to keep in mind is a lot of times we think about, as Americans, that we're not necessarily a producer of goods, right? So why would people buy from the United States? And it's actually sort of a myth. There's a lot of stuff that people around the world want to buy from the US. So I'm going to take an example in China, okay? There's over 1,000 different types of soda pop, cola, Coke, depending upon what region you're in China. But Coca-Cola, based in Atlanta, my hometown, has a 16% market share. There's over 1,000 rivals, and they have 16% market share. It's an American brand. It's something that's absolutely known globally, and people will seek it out because it's an American. It's an American brand. So the US as a brand is actually the strongest and most valuable brand in the world. There are people who actually take countries and determine what the brand is, and the US absolutely has the strongest one. So how do we take advantage of that? How do we figure out how to make the world a better e-commerce place for you to grow your profits? So as Americans, we see the world our way. We expect to see things in American English. We expect to go to websites and, whatever your definition of what an American looks like, you expect to see American stuff. You expect to see American address fields. You expect promotions to be in American time zones, because a lot of our websites are targeted to an American audience because of our size. Well, it's very different around the world. We've had a number of discussions with the sessions that we've had earlier today of how different it is to work in different parts of the world. One of those is payment methods. As it says up here, Visa and MasterCard only have 25% of global e-commerce. Well, the rest of it comes from somewhere. So for these different payment methods, which is an entirely different conversation than currency, for these different payment methods, there are other things that need to be done to be able to accommodate your consumers, your audience. So taking a look at the different payment methods up here, what if you went to a checkout page as an American and saw these payment methods? How would you know how to buy? You probably wouldn't buy, because chances are none of these look familiar to you. You might find the pink one that says Pay Now to be familiar to you, because it's Klarna, and they just got Snoop Dogg to be their spokesperson. And they actually do sell smooth peanut butter, because his whole thing is about smooth payments. You can't make this up. So we've got our bags packed. Let's start our journey. And we're going to start it here at home in North America. Not surprisingly, a very high banked population in North America and very good internet penetration. But you can't always take a look at a region like North America and see, oh, well, it's a mature market, because there are a number of countries in North America, as we all know. Don't have to do Geography 101. So, for example, Mexico, very different than the United States and Canada. And Michelle brought a number of those key differences up in her presentation earlier today. It's a country that's only 37% banked to our numbers, and e-commerce growth is 34%. So compared to the rest of North America, there's definitely a lot of opportunity there for e-commerce. And where do they import from? From the United States. But taking a little closer look at the US, we're the majority of North American e-commerce. Again, not a surprise. But a lot of it, for us, is a shift from brick and mortar to online. So, 20 years ago, if you had told me that Amazon could deliver packages to me every day and I didn't have to go out and buy my own dog food at a store, probably tell you that it was a magical life. It's a pretty magical life if you think about it. But it's changing how we do retail and how we work. And so the shift to online for us, it's a bit more of a cannibalization than some other regions. And again, probably not a surprise to see that cards are a huge part of how we pay for our online goods and services. Now, there are some bank transfers, there are some e-wallets, but one thing here that kind of sticks out is a cash-based payment. As Michelle brought up earlier, Mexico is a very cash-based economy. So I want to talk a little bit about how Mexicans pay for things, and it shouldn't be a deterrent for you to be able to work and sell your goods in Mexico. So they have a typical checkout flow, not unlike things that we would see. You put items in your cart, but instead of entering a card number or a bank account number, you actually select OXXO Pay or 7-Eleven or number one of these types of goods, and you end up with a voucher. You take your voucher to the convenience store and you pay cash. The examples that were brought up earlier around people every Friday going to the ATM and getting their cash, well, they're still shopping online with that cash. They're just taking their voucher and their cash, and they're paying a physical person to complete the transaction. Now, not exactly the same way that we're merging online and brick and mortar in other parts of the world, but it solves a need. These people want to shop online, and this is how they can do it. Next, let's go to South America. There are a lot of emerging markets in South America. Chile actually leads in internet inclusivity and very active in social media. Top markets that import to South America are actually Germany, China, and the US. E-commerce is growing very quickly, and it's expected to continue. Something to know about South America is that all because you can cover it in a couple of languages doesn't mean that you're able to reach every culture. It's very important to use idiomatic language within a number of these countries and realize that they have extremely distinct cultures. I read recently that you can actually cover 90% of the globe's population with 21 languages, and that may be true, but don't think that you can do it just by putting things through Google Translate. The more that you can localize and target on a market, you're definitely going to see better conversion rates. So now let's take a little closer look at Brazil. And I know that's a market that's been touched on a bit today, so for the sake of time, we'll go a bit quickly. It's the largest economy in South America. Not much of a surprise there, being such a big country. They do have strong long-term prospects for growth. Definitely a challenged market at times, but it is one that we expect to see strong growth in. Cash-based, like I mentioned, is very big in Brazil, but it's also local cards. ELO and HyperCard are a couple that come to mind that are very strong in this region as well. And we're also seeing some growth in bank transfer methods. Now, a bank transfer method is one where in that checkout flow, the consumer selects and enters their banking information, and it's a push payment to the merchant. It's definitely not something that we're accustomed to in the US, except for things like bill pay, but it's a common method in a number of parts of the world. And from a merchant perspective, one really nice thing about it is in many of these methods, there's no chargebacks. They don't have the same kinds of protections. So merchants may deal directly with consumers, and they don't have the same ease of tapping, charge this back, charge that back. So from a fraud perspective, it's definitely different. So next, we're going to go over to Europe. They have the highest internet and bank populations. This is a market in which e-commerce is definitely mature, but it's growing, especially for bargains. People in Europe definitely love their bargains. And it's a different market. You may think, oh, well, you know, it could be a lot like the US, but in America, we look for a lot of simplicity in the things that we do. Overall, in Europe, they don't have the same fear of complexity that we do. And again, many languages and many cultures. You'll find the Nordics to be much more mobile first, as is Spain. This may seem like a bit too much of a stereotype, but we've seen that it's true. Italians tend to be emotional as they shop. They take items in and out of their carts before they make their decision, and imagining with lots of hand movement. The French actually have state-mandated sale periods. So if you're going to work in France, it's definitely something that you need to consider. And we're going to take a little bit closer look at Germany because it definitely has a number of things that make it stand out compared to the rest of Europe. Our biggest office is in Munich, so the Bavarian theme is not a surprise here. It's the largest economy in Western Europe, in all of Europe. E-commerce isn't growing that fast there, but it's a very mature market. It's 15% of all retail. So in that regard, it's a little bit more like the United States. The thing about Germany, and it was brought up earlier today, they don't like credit. They don't like credit cards. They love cash. They have a real aversion to debt. But they love bank transfers. So there are a number of schemes within Germany where people can enter their bank credentials, either a username and login, or their IBAN number and a password to be able to push payments. It's also a country in which invoices are common, where people pay well after delivery. Now, that's something that from an e-commerce perspective may not sit well, but there are other options, such as Klarna, to be able to have consumers pay later while still protecting the merchant. So there are definitely options with guarantees. Want to point out one other country in Europe, again brought up earlier today, is the Netherlands with Ideal. Our stats show 57%. I think it was mentioned to be 55%, but I think we're pretty close there. The Dutch love to buy cross-border, and it was the reason why Ideal is so popular in the Netherlands, which, to give a little more clarity, it is a bank transfer method that's connected to about a dozen banks within the Netherlands. They love to buy cross-border. In fact, 84% of shoppers have shopped cross-border, and Ideal figured out pretty early the opportunity for e-commerce. They really jumped the gun and told the Dutch people, you know what, if you're going to buy online, Ideal is the way to do it, and we're all creatures of habit. And because Ideal was really brought forth as being the first big thing to do for e-commerce, the Dutch have stuck with it, and they love it. So let's move eastward. We're going to take a quick look at Eastern Europe and CIS. Banking and internet penetration, about 2/3 for both of those, but it's absolutely a set of emerging markets. And within Russia, you can see it's a very big piece of e-commerce from the region as a whole. 62% of Russians shop cross-border, including to the United States. Certainly you have to keep in mind things such as sanctions. It's something we've had to deal with, making sure that we're not offering methods that are under sanction. But beyond that, it is a huge opportunity for Americans and other countries to sell their goods. One thing to know about Russia is, for a language translation perspective, Russians will trust your site much, much more if you have it translated to Russian. They may be able to speak the other languages, but it's just a matter of trust for them. Russians also love their e-wallets just after credit cards. It's also a market where invoices are huge, payment after delivery. And certainly bank transfers are a big one as well. But you also see cash-based transactions take up about 1/5 of their e-commerce. Their cash-based transactions are a little bit different than what you see in a country like Mexico. One of the big ones in Russia is called Kiwi. And I'll have to admit, for about my first month working at PPro, I kept thinking that Kiwi had to be a payment method from New Zealand, but it's not. It's one in Russia and in the CIS. So what people are able to do with Kiwi as an e-wallet, also serving as cash-based, because they don't have to enter their bank details, but what they do is they load this wallet in a variety of ways. They can load the wallet through their bank account, they can load it through a card, but what's actually quite interesting is that people will load it with cash. There's about 175,000 Kiwi kiosks throughout the CIS, and over 40,000 vendors accept Kiwi. So if you're looking to go into this market, Kiwi is definitely an option that you want to consider. Does anyone have jet lag yet? Well, we are on our way to Asia Pacific. This is a place where online growth is booming. But there's still a long way to go for internet penetration within the region. It's also a very, very mobile-first region. Much like Africa, in the way that when you don't have an infrastructure that can bog down evolution of products, if you haven't seen the internet before and you have it for the first time in 2019, it's very, very likely that you're going to have it based upon a mobile device. I mean, why go and get a desktop computer in today's era, right? You can have a tablet, you can have a phone. There's no reason to go through all of those different steps. So we're going to make a couple of stops within Asia, and the first one is to Indonesia. Their online marketplace is very small compared to the rest of Asia, but it's actually a giant opportunity. So the banked population, compared to the rest of Asia, is actually really, really tiny. It's not even half of Indonesians are within the banked population. And their credit card penetration is only 2%. But as you can see up here, it's 35% of e-commerce transactions. Now, this is an area in which we're really seeing a giant rise of the middle class. It's a country of 260 million people. So we definitely see a massive opportunity for e-commerce within Indonesia. And one of the ways that they pay is on their mobile devices, like I said. So it's really growing, and even to do it in brick and mortar. This is something that we're seeing in a number of parts of the world where their mobile wallet is actually a QR code. So you can read a QR code at a merchant, or you can have the QR code on your device, and that's actually how the transaction is made. The scene here is kind of in a kiosk where you can get some food. They don't need to have a point-of-sale system because it's all integrated within the system with the QR codes. So you can be a cashless merchant and really just run on mobile devices. Now, we can't travel the world and not talk about China, right? And everyone talks about China in a number of different ways. I actually saw today in the news that there was some thought that the Chinese economy was going to slow down because of current trade relations between China and the United States, and it's still roaring on. And people also think of China as being much more of an exporter than an importer. And yeah, that's true. But you need to take a minute and think about the scope of a country like China. It's 1.4 billion people. So even if you get a tiny percentage of something in China, it's massive. An example of that, Alibaba recently launched a health plan. And they marketed it on mobile devices. They marketed it through Alipay, which is some payment method probably a number of you have heard of. For this health plan, within 6 months, they got over 50 million signups. That's 5 times the population of New York City have signed up for this health plan in only 6 months. Wouldn't you love to get 50 million Chinese merchants to your site within 6 months? Actually, let's not ask your logistics team about that. But it's the opportunity to get huge numbers is definitely there. And you may be thinking, okay, well, it was on mobile devices. It's probably wealthier people, the true middle class and above. And no, half of them were migrant workers who have mobile devices, who saw this on Alipay and were able to sign up through their mobile devices. So the scope of China is absolutely giant. China is way more than tourists and way more than luxury goods. And 26% of cross-border commerce with China is from the United States. So it's a very mobile-forward country. Not a surprise there. But not just for payments. We may be hearing about WeChat Pay, Alipay, that type of thing, but there's so much more to it. The middle class is not tied to the brick-and-mortar experience that the rest of us are, because of how they're so mobile forward, how the middle class has emerged. They're looking for a lot more in how they shop and how they engage with their mobile devices than other parts of the world. They're very forward in this regard. They want entertainment, they want discovery, they want social engagement. There are very strong ties between shopping and social media. So it's probably not a surprise that e-wallets dominate. But there's also, it's just a number of different things that make this market different. And an example that I've saw for this in the past few weeks, there was a commercial for Centrum vitamins. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? But it starred Tom Hiddleston, who we know is Loki from the Avenger movies. And it actually made worldwide mentions of this commercial. And you're thinking, why would a vitamin make worldwide news? And there were a few key things for this ad for the Chinese market that made a difference. First off, it was filmed in portrait. Haven't we all been told you never make a video in portrait? It was filmed in portrait because they were watching it on their mobile devices. Tom Hiddleston in this commercial, he's catering to his woman, he's making her breakfast, and he talks about the vitamins in flawless Mandarin. It made Chinese women go crazy. There are lots and lots of social media posts now on Weibo and other platforms of receipts of purchases of vitamins. That's some really crazy social engineering there. But if you can make that kind of thing happen for vitamins, it shows that there's potential for all kinds of goods. I can't really see how I would do that for vitamins, but it could be, it'll give you all homework to figure out how to make your items and your goods as sexy as vitamins now are in China. So another thing to consider is holidays when you're talking about different parts of the world. Many of you may have heard of the holiday Singles Day. Anyone? Singles Day? It's 11/11, November 11th, 2626, and it's kind of an anti-Valentine's Day. It was created, in the 1990s, got picked up by Alibaba, and it's turned into a giant sale day. So it's not just single people buying themselves gifts for, making themselves feel better about being single, which I don't know why someone would have to feel good about, or not feel good about being single, but this holiday for treating yourself, for being a single person, has turned into a giant sales holiday. Last year, sales on Singles Day were up 27% from the year before, but the really crazy part is the number, $30.8 billion of sales in that day. And not just in China. We actually saw our ideal transactions, a payment method in the Netherlands, go up by 90% that day. Huge, huge day. Now, $30.8 billion is more than Amazon Prime Day, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday combined. So if you haven't figured out yet, Singles Day is a massive, massive day of opportunity for sales, as long as you have good bargains. All right, so we're back home for our whirlwind trip around the world. So what have we learned? Besides there being a lot of places that you could potentially market your goods around the world. What you need to do is you need to identify and create a strategy that's really tailored to your country or to a market. You can't make any assumptions around language or geography. You need to know what you're getting into in these various markets and tailor your strategy specific to that market, about the technology that they have, the holidays that they celebrate, and really about their culture. Certainly, I'm from PPRO, so I've got to tell you that the acceptance of local payment methods absolutely makes a difference. As you can see with the Netherlands example, it really does increase conversion at your checkout, and it really does align their experience to what they're accustomed to. And certainly, we all know that when people feel comfortable with their payment experience, that they're going to buy more, and they're going to buy more often. And finally, this is not something that you need to wait to do. You can look into these markets now, because you want to be a part of these markets and build trust within these markets before they become too mature. It's work, so you need to find partners. And certainly today we've talked about, different speakers have spoken about, finding people in those markets, finding trusted partners to make sure that you've got your messaging straight. But once you do, the world becomes a massive opportunity for you. So hopefully you've enjoyed our trip. We apologize if the drink cart didn't make it quite to your seat, but we are now ready to land, and I hope that you've learned a bit and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.